Hello and welcome to part 7 of our Maya hard surface modelling tutorial where we model this old school sailing ship. So in last episode, episode 6, we left off with making the masts and all the different separate pieces. We also made this piece up the front here and the rudder as well. So the first thing I want to get into is, and I've only just noticed this now, and this will probably happen no matter your experience or how long you've been modelling for. But there's actually a little mistake that we made, and it's not a really big one fortunately, but these parts here and the hull here, you see how they're coming up at the sort of the same angle? These bits here are actually meant to come up directly straight. So it's pretty easy to fix. All we're going to do is get out our lattice tool that we used quite a few episodes ago now, and just gently push these parts in the right direction. So because we're only really focusing on the front here, we're kind of just interested in these pieces here. And we're also going to use a lattice with just a vertex selection rather than every single piece of the mesh. So we're just going to come to the side view, and then I'm going to go ahead and select up to here, I think. I'm just going to press 4 on the keyboard to make sure I've got it equally selected on both sides. We're then going to go to Deform and Lattice. And it works just like normal, except it's only going to affect the vertices that we have selected. By default, it's going to have 5 divisions in the T axes, which I think is going to do us just fine, because we don't want to edit the curvature of everything down here, right? Like if we just had one, then you'd end up changing a lot of the curvature. We don't want to do that. We're going to add a few more in the U division as well, because we don't want all of this to come up perfectly straight, just sort of towards the front here. Actually, saying that, we probably do want this all to come up perfectly straight. So, thinking about it, I think, scratch that. Let's not do the lattice. We will just go ahead into vertex selection mode. Actually, lattice, just specifically for this piece. We're going to take off our divisions in T, because we just need 2. We're going to hold down right click and go to lattice point, and then we're just going to pull that over. And you can see here it's not coming out perfectly, and that's because the shape here is sort of curved. It's not like a perfect square, right? Not perfectly straight. So it's going to pull some of these lower parts here, but that's okay, we can fix that. So we're just going to do that so that comes up pretty much as straight as possible. And then all we'll do is we'll come into vertex selection mode, select these ones up the front here, and then we'll hold down B and then drag the middle mouse button to go into soft select. And we're just going to select a pretty good amount of this, and then we're just going to nudge this back in, just so it kind of roundabout matches there. And then don't worry if it's not exactly the same, we can go ahead and edit that again. We're just going to edit our pivot points so that we can snap these vertices back into the correct spots. And then we'll go ahead and do that for all of these here. I have my edit pivot key bound to D. I would definitely encourage you to set your own hotkeys. Just help speed things up a little bit. Okay. So we'll just pull some of these out to match. Right, and it just goes to show, that's why we're taking this quite slow, that even if you make mistakes, it's okay, right? At this stage, it's really, really easy to fix. That's why we kept it as simple as possible for this long, just so that if we do need to make changes like this, it's not a big deal. We can just go ahead and do that. And it doesn't take us too much time. We don't have to rebuild anything, which is the important thing, because that can really, really use up your time. We'll just edit edge flow a little bit on some of these. And there we go. So now that's coming up straight. That's looking a little bit more accurate. Now we're just going to go ahead and duplicate this and take this over to the other side with our scale trick. So we'll just press Ctrl D to duplicate, then we'll put -1 in the scale of X, and then modify and then freeze transformations just to bring that back in line with everything else. Okay, so now that we've made that change, we're going to go ahead and actually add in sort of the captain's cabin, the part that overhangs at the back here. So we have pulled out the back of the hull to meet it, but if we look from the top, just hide our ship, you can see it actually kind of comes out like this. And it's quite a bit wider, right, because it has to accommodate all the space. These rooms were, I mean, they kind of like varied in size depending on the ship. So we'll just go ahead and add that in. We're going to start, like most things, with a cube. We're just going to go into our side view here, make sure our reference is turned on. I'm just going to press 4 on the keyboard to go into wireframe mode. And then I'm going to pull that up to about here. Then we'll just pull this down. It'd be good while you're doing this to also be looking at your reference, because this part here can be a little complicated. But don't worry too much. Okay, the back part also kind of curves out a little bit, right? Like it comes out like this. That's why it doesn't look, you know, perfectly. Like we can see some of the windows from the side. So what we'll do is we'll just pull these vertices back so they kind of meet flush with the part of the hole that we've made so far. Okay, and then we'll pull this out just till it goes to about this line. And then pull this down just so it follows the curvature a little bit. Okay, just down to around about here. And then we'll pull this down a tad as well. Okay, we're just trying to make sure this is following the curvature of what we made already. Right. Okay, we're just going to hide the rest of our ship because right now we don't need that. We're going to come to the top view and we're just going to scale this out until it kind of meets the width. Okay. And again, this is where we're going to run into problems where our blueprints don't quite match, annoyingly. That, for whatever reason, seems to happen quite a lot with these online things. I think they don't. They're more of like an art piece. I don't know whether this is taken from an actual real-life model. I think if it was, you'd have a hard time putting it together. But it's okay, we can kind of just figure it out as we go. Okay, so I think what we'll do then for the time being is, because this is so off, we will just freeze the transformations on this so we know where it's supposed to be. And we'll just pull this back just so it kind of matches where it's supposed to be in the top reference. And we're going to keep the rest of the ship hidden for now, just until we get the this part finished, or the shape mostly finished anyway. It looks like our reference isn't quite centered, so I'm just going to pull that over a little. Okay, scale this out a little bit more. Then what we're going to look to do is pull these parts in on the side, like so, just until that touches that point. And this part here, we are going to pull in a little bit more. Not too much, just a tad. Okay, then we'll go ahead and use the multi-cut tool to add a loop in the middle. And we're going to scale this out a bit till it meets there. Actually, what we should probably do is, instead of matching this lip here, because that part's actually going to extend out, we kind of want to match where the windows are, right? So we'll just pull this in a bit and scale that in some. Okay, like so. Pull that in a bit more. Pull that back. We'll have these come straight back like this. Okay, then we'll add a loop in the middle. Let's kind of extrude that out a little bit. So we're kind of getting the shape already. But we just need to take our time to make sure that we have this correct. It's always a good idea as well, whenever you're doing this, just to keep like constantly looking at a reference, especially because the blueprints aren't 100% reliable. Okay, kind of like so. Okay, maybe we'll pull these back a little. Okay, we'll just zero out the transforms here. Not the scale, sorry, we need that. We're just going to hide our reference and then bring back the rest of the ship and just kind of see what that looks like when it's sitting on there. And that's looking not too bad. There is a funny intersection here, but I think that's just because of the shape of the hull. And if you look here as well, it kind of cuts away. It doesn't just come in at an angle. Like if we were to just do a cut there and delete this, that's a little bit better. So that will just, we'll be able to fix that in time with making sure that the shape matches from the side here. So what I'm going to do is, for the time being, I'm just going to delete these inside faces. And I'm also going to go ahead and just put an edge loop down the middle, because we only want to work on one side of this for the time being, just because it makes it easier, and then we can go ahead and duplicate it across afterwards. Okay, so I am just going to come back to the side view again, and I'm just going to pull this up just to make sure that it's matching the height here. Okay, and then we just want to make sure this is coming back perfectly straight, like so. Okay, great. So what we'll do now is we'll hide our reference, we'll save it there. I think now's a good time actually to increment and save here. I find myself doing this quite a lot because I get paranoid and worry that I'm going to lose a bunch of progress or the files will get corrupted. So I'm just going to save this now. It was ship 001, we're going to do ship 002, just so we have a nice key point to go back to and recover things if necessary. You can also just make duplicates in your outliner and hide them if you want, but this is just how I like to do it. We're going to go ahead and just make a cut here, just along that line where it contacts the hull. Okay. We're then going to come to our view here, and we're just going to pull those out until they touch the hull here, like so. Okay, then we'll just delete that face. What we're trying to do here really is just kind of make it flush with this portion of the hull, or as flush as we can anyway. Okay, and then we're just going to move this vertice out a little bit just to make sure that our curvature stays mostly in line, because otherwise we're going to have this weird sort of shaped face and we don't really want that. Okay, we're going to pull this back just until these two contact the hull. In fact, what we might do is we'll just bring our reference back from the top and then adjust our curvature a little more. So that needs to come back right to about there. I think what we'll do is we'll go ahead and chuck in another loop going from there. And we'll just pull these out just to make sure that shape's kind of matching. Okay, and again, we're just trying to keep these flush with our hull. The same with this part up here. Okay, and you can see this part really can be quite tricky, so don't worry, just take as much time on this as you need. And don't really feel afraid to just sort of push vertices around at this point, because, you know, you kind of just have to, really. We'll pull that out some. Okay, and it might look a little weird for a while, but that's okay. Okay, we're going to go ahead and add another loop. Actually, no. We won't add another one there. We'll pull this back slightly. Pull this out a tad. Okay, this part is certainly one of the more difficult parts to make, but then once it's done we can just go ahead and add all the details. Okay, what we'll do now is I'm just going to pull this edge down, because we're going to want to add another one here where this joint is, just so we can get that to stay flush. We'll just add one about in the middle, and then line it up to that seam, and then just pull that in. Lining it up there, and again just making sure it stays flush. Okay. Kind of like that. And just like with everything else, we're keeping this as simple as possible for as long as possible. Okay, we also want to try and keep the things, or the quads, as even as possible as well at this stage, just because it will make our lives easier. Okay, we can actually go ahead and delete this part now because we don't need that anymore. What I'm also going to do is just delete these back faces here because we also don't need those. Because this portion now is going to take over the entire sort of back half of the ship, right? And these parts normally have quite a lot of fancy design elements to them, like definitely at the front and the back of the ship is where a lot of the kind of more ornate sections are, like ornate carved wood, and it kind of varies, but especially around this period, things are pretty ornate. Just looking from the side here, you can see it doesn't come up perfectly straight like this, so what we'll do for the time being, I'm just going to go ahead and crease this, and you might have guessed already, we're going to go ahead and probably smooth this in a second. Just want to make sure before we do that though that we have this as even as possible. Okay, there's always a good idea to check things from multiple different angles as well, just so you can make sure that things are looking correct, because sometimes if you're looking at just one angle you won't always notice anything that's wrong. Sometimes I like to just look at it upside down as well, just to give your eye a fresh perspective. Okay, I'm actually going to pull this away so it's not flush for the time being, because I think right now we don't have enough geometry to get that to look clean. I'd rather just have a nice, like, straight angle for the time being. Okay, don't worry about this part getting curved, that's okay, we can fix that afterwards. We might just go ahead and do a quick edit edge flow. make sure that lines up. Okay, let's go ahead and smooth that, just to give us a little bit more geometry. Okay, we can take out our edge crease now. I'm also just going to remove this edge, because for the time being we don't need that. I'm then going to just come back to this view and make sure that this edge kind of lines up nicely with our reference. Okay, I'll now just soft select that in a little. And then I'll do a little bit of that edge flow, just to make sure that curvature remains quite nice. Okay, just again keeping this nice and flush. Okay, looks like we have a little bit of wobbliness here. So we'll just add edge flow on these, just to get that fixed up. Looks like some of these edges here might actually need to come out a little bit anyway, so we'll just pull those out slightly. About something like this. Okay, what we'll do next is, this is the point where things sort of seem to cut in a little bit, so we'll pull these edges back, like so. Okay, we want to make sure this comes flush still. Actually, I think what we'll do is we'll just cut this out instead of editing that. So we'll pull this vertice back and these back a little. Okay, then we're just going to go ahead and delete these faces because we don't need those. This is where things can really get quite fiddly, so if you struggle with this part, that's definitely okay. Feel free to ask questions in the comments. I know the first time I had to make this bit, I also struggled massively. And you know what, that's okay. Okay. We'll just pull these back, and what we're trying to do here is just kind of get the shape to look correct. You see how here it comes up at an angle. Okay, if at this stage things are looking very, very weird, don't worry at all. That's okay. It does happen. Okay, then we'll pull these back. Okay, and then we're just going to finish off this edge. Okay, then we'll just do a little bit of editing now to make sure that this is correct. So the reason why this is happening is because we need the curvature here to be a lot less than it is down here, right? Like we almost want this to be a smaller version of what's down here. So we're just going to spend a bit of time moving these vertices around until we kind of get that shape. Okay, we can also throw in a few edit edge flows. Same with these here. Okay, we'll just pull these back down so they match. Okay. Okay, there we go, and that's looking a little bit better. So kind of, it did seem a bit all over the place for the time being, but that's okay, as long as you're careful and you can sort of move things back into place. It's really not too bad. You just kind of have to be gentle with it. So don't be afraid, you know, if you get to a point like this and it seems like it's quite messy, that's okay, it can happen. Just keep going with it. It can be tempting, even now I think, just to like give up on those bits. But it's okay, you just have to keep going with it. Okay, we'll pull this back. Okay, we'll just turn off our reference and see what that's kind of looking like. Okay, what we'll do here as well is we'll just go ahead and select these edges, because this part here is meant to be separate, so we'll probably make a cut there. What we're going to do is we're going to hold down Control and Shift and then rotate, and then that's just going to slide the edges along the axes without sort of significantly warping things. And then also going to do the same, just going to scale that slightly, because we just want this edge to line up with this part. And don't worry if this comes a bit out of alignment, that's okay, we can just pull that back. Okay, and we're just going to go ahead and cut this whole portion off. You can come up to Mesh and then... Oh, no, sorry, Edit Mesh. Then we're going to go to the Edge, Edit Mesh, Detach. Then we're going to double select this part and that will already be separated. Then we're just going to do Separate. And that will give us two separate pieces. Okay, like so. And then this part will probably have to be edited quite a bit more as well. I think this will have to come in because this roof will have some slope to it. but this part here is kind of roughly as it will be. But I think for the time being, let's just go ahead and park that. We'll just duplicate it across, just so we have that complete picture. And then this gap here, don't worry about that. There will be a piece that kind of slides in here and connects up to the hole. So that will get filled in as well. So that's kind of the silhouette of the ship. If I just press 7 on the keyboard just to go into lighting mode, because we don't have a light, we'll just see black. You can see the silhouette's pretty much there. Let's go ahead and start adding some extra details up at the front. So I didn't know this for the longest time. Let me show you the reference quickly. So there's these portions here, these bits here, these kind of cylinders up at the front of the ship. I thought those were just portholes. It turns out, I think those are actually toilets. You can go and sit in those from the outside, and the reason they overhang is because that's where, you know, everything goes out from, just into the ocean. So we'll go ahead and put those in. Okay, we'll just start with a cylinder. We'll come to the side view and turn on our reference. And you can just about see it poking out here. So we'll move it to about here. And again, this is going to be, you know, make sure while you're doing this that you're also looking at your reference as well, because our blueprints aren't going to tell us absolutely everything, unfortunately. Okay. If this part of your ship is coming up curved like that, don't worry, it's supposed to. And then we kind of want this part to come down here. These are probably a bit too wide. Pull that out some. Maybe out to here, something like that. And then we'll just pull that up until we reach the top. Around about here. Okay. So that's coming up just to the top of this part here. And this part is supposed to be higher, but there'll be a sort of like another banister that goes on the top. So that's okay. Let's pull that out to the side so it's overhanging slightly. Okay, then we'll go ahead and we will duplicate with Control D. We're going to go to Modify and Reset Transformations, and then we're just going to minus the scale in X just to get that over to the other side as well. Next, what we can take a look at is adding. There's some parts of the front that kind of stick out, like I don't exactly know what they were used for, to be honest. They kind of have like hooks hanging from them. They might have been involved in like lowering and raising the anchors because they often seem connected to that. They kind of stick out from the side here. If I just quickly show you in the reference here, you can see there's these parts here, and then there's holes here, and I think there's like a winch and pulley and some hooks will come down. They might even have it in the side reference. If I can find one that's not too blurry. Yeah, you can see here there's like a winch coming down. It's connected up to the anchor that's connected up to here too. So these kind of come out at an angle from this point. And at this stage, because of how inaccurate the blueprints are, we kind of have to almost guesstimate where something's supposed to be, and that can be quite tricky. In an ideal world, that wouldn't happen. I think if you're actually working on a film project, you would actually get, you know, quite good reference. But unfortunately, these blueprints you get off the internet aren't always the best. So you kind of have to get a little bit creative. So right now we're just trying to match the angle. push that back. Okay, I think that's just an issue with the blueprint. This should probably be aligned, like this edge here should be aligned with the top edge of your banister. Up here. And then it kind of tapers off a little bit typically. Okay, and they come out not quite at that of an extreme angle, so we'll pull that down slightly as well. Kind of something like this. Okay, that looks pretty good to me. We'll go ahead and duplicate and then modify reset transformations and then transform that across too. And what we're doing here is we're kind of just trying to get some of the details in, just to give us an idea of where everything else is supposed to go. It can just be handy to show you, sort of like get everything else into place, and then once we have some of those bits there, then we can start moving things around if something doesn't look quite right. Helps get everything kind of like, you can size everything up in your eyes then, rather than just like looking at the reference. There is a banister that goes across the center here, so we'll go ahead and add that. Like so. You think this kind of is the detail pass, but we're almost blocking in the details. So a lot of, because these ships have so many different little parts to them, a lot of this is just going to be blocking in things for quite a while, even when it's going to, like, it comes to starting to add detail. So this part here, we're going to bring this up just so it's the same height as these for the time being. Okay, like so. And then this should not actually be one solid piece like this. So we're gonna bring this part up to about here. Something like that, and then pull this up a bit. These are looking a little bit too tall, so I'm just gonna pull those down. Okay, then we're going to extend this to come out to the side, and then what we'll do is we'll just pull or extend these particular vertices out so they match the shape. Okay, and this part actually curves up a little bit rather than just being flat. And that kind of happens with the whole top portion of the hull as well, or the deck. We'll go ahead and add that curvature in later. So I think for the time being, actually, we'll just leave that straight. Okay. There is also a piece that goes at the bottom, so we'll just duplicate that and then pull that down, like so. Okay, and there's also a number of bits that go, if we just turn our reference back on, you can see here there's like these little nodules that go on the top here, so we're going to start adding those in too. These are quite simple to do. So we'll just scale this down till it fits. Kind of like so. And then we can see these are actually a bit more rectangular rather than cube-like. So we'll scale those in a little bit. Okay, we'll just make sure this is following the curvature of our banister. Okay, we'll come back to the side view, and you can see that they don't just come up perfectly straight. They kind of have this part here that curves in a little bit. Okay, so we'll just add a couple loops. I'm going to bevel this just to give us a few extra ones. Okay, kind of like that. Then we'll take this edge and we'll just scale that in. pull this down, and then we'll just scale these ones in too. Okay, I'll go to mesh display and then harden edge, so that looks kind of like that. Okay, maybe pull this edge up a little, and then bevel this edge, give that a few more segments. Okay, there we go. So we have that piece. What we'll do is we'll just pull that down, and then this also needs to match in the curvature in X as well. But we can make that change in a second. What we'll do is we'll just duplicate these from the side, right? Just so we have the correct spacing. So again, just pressing Control D and then moving these with the middle mouse button. There'll be another one in the middle, around about here. A lot of the time with reference like this as well, things will be hidden, like we have our part of the banister hidden behind the anchor, so you kind of just have to like see the others, see that they're mostly kind of even, then guess there should be another one in the middle. What's happened now is these aren't actually following the curvature, so we'll pull them in from the perspective view. And we're also going to have to add a bit of rotation to all of these to get these to match. Okay, I think we might actually need one more. No, so there's a separate part here. This is a different piece. We'll make that in a second. What we're going to do now is we're just going to have to go ahead and then rotate each one of these. I'm just going to align my pivot to the top here, just so it's connected properly. We have to rotate each one of these just to make sure that it's sitting quite nicely on our banister. Okay, and at this stage things can start to get quite tedious just because you have so many bits, but that's why we're only doing one side at a time, right? So what we do is we do one side and you can just duplicate it across. It saves your like time and all the trouble of having to do it twice. Oh. If you're wondering how I'm focusing on things, by the way, I don't think I mentioned that yet. I'm just pressing F on the keyboard. If I like come out here and just press F, it will focus back in on whatever you have selected, whether that's a face or part of the object. Okay. Okay, so a few more to do. I think what I'll do is I'll go ahead and time-lapse this, just so until this part's done, and then I will come back to you. Okay, so that's all of those parts aligned. We'll go ahead and select all of these in the outliner, Control D, modify freeze transformations, modify reset transformations, and then just scale in X. And then we'll go back to freeze transforms. Okay, so that's some of the details blocked in up at the front. There's also quite a bit more to change on this part in particular. Generally, not always, but there's typically a gap here in the middle. I don't think there is, from what I can tell in this particular blueprint. Right, otherwise we'd be able to see like these sort of like pillars come all the way down, but that doesn't seem to be happening here. So what I'm gonna do, I think this part also comes down and curves down here as well, right? Like how we did with this part at the back. So it's almost like stepped. So what we'll do is we will go ahead and add that step in as well. So we're just going to look at it from the side, see around about where it starts. It seems kind of about in the middle here, so what we'll do is we'll just pull this edge up to around about here. And we'll pull this up slightly just to adjust the curvature, and then we're going to extend this out. I think it will probably end around about here. We're then going to come back into perspective mode and just make sure this lines up. Like so. And then we're going to just bevel this. Give this maybe 4 divisions. And then we have an edge here that's pretty close to the other one, so we're just going to target weld that back in place. Okay, and there we go, we have our stepped version. I'm just going to delete the one on the other side because we're going to have to replace that in a second. What I'm also going to do is, you can see here as well that it looks like it's made up of separate pieces. So what I like to do whenever we're converting our blocking into sort of a final piece is I'll just go ahead and duplicate that just with Control D, and then I'm only focusing on making this top portion here to begin with, right where you can see where this line is. So to do that, I'm just going to go ahead and delete everything except for these topmost faces, and I'll explain the reason for that in a second. Right, so we just have this top portion here. What we can then do now that we have this is we can actually just extrude straight down. Okay, and that gives us that portion. It might on your end look like this, black. It just means the normals are reversed, so just hold down space, go to mesh display, and then reverse. We're also just going to make sure that this is staying flush with our floor. What I'm then going to do is we're going to pull this down so this actually sits underneath this part. Okay, so we will go ahead and select all of our vertices, and then we'll just pull that down a tad, and then pull this back just so it's inside of that top piece. Like so. I'm then also just going to use the multi-cut tool because we need to reduce the size of this part, and we could just scale it, right? But because it's not perfectly straight, it's going to scale a bit weird, so we actually just need to cut off some material. So I'm going to multi-cut tool like that, and then just select these outside edges and delete just to decrease the size. And then going to remove this top edge, and then we're just going to rebuild this part. So I'll just double select that, and then bridge those faces just to bring that back, and then we'll just fill hole here, and then just clean up the topology. Again, like we were explaining in the last episode, it's always a good idea just to do this as you go so you don't have to do it later. Okay. And then we can just terminate this one at the point there. Okay, so now we have that stepped piece. You can also probably see that there is another line that goes through the middle here. So we'll get ahead to adding that soon. I'm just going to go ahead and smooth the normals on these edges just so we can see the curvature properly. Like so. And then I'm just going to duplicate, modify, reset transformations, and then scale those across again. Okay, at this stage, with adding the detail, it's kind of just like little minute, well, not always minute, but small little changes over time that will add up to eventually having nice, lots and lots of little bits of detail, and there's definitely a lot of detail to add. Okay. We've added quite a few little bits, so what I'm going to do is I am just going to group these parts up into sort of groups that make sense. So I'm going to call this upper, or actually let's call this top deck detail underscore group. And this part of the back here, we'll just name this rear underscore group. Okay, and then we'll put those underneath the main ship group. Okay, next thing that we can go ahead and add in is, I think this portion here, you can kind of see, if I just hide this, there's this band of material here. You see where this darker line is? That's actually kind of like a reinforced bit of the wood. If I come ahead and look at the reference, you can see here, it actually extrudes out a little bit. So what I'll do is I'll just duplicate this. Just press Control, oh sorry, not Control. We're just going to select all of these faces. I'm then going to go to Select and then Inverse, just to delete the ones we don't need, because we just want to take this part of the whole, right? I'm then looking at our reference, just going to extrude this out a tad till that kind of matches the thickness that we're looking for. Kind of something like that. Okay, and then that just sits on there like so. There's also another one slightly further up the hull. If you look at our reference, you can also see around about here. So we will duplicate this again, come back to our side view. That seems to be around about here. So we'll just add in some extra edges. And that's just for the purpose of subtracting or extracting this part. So don't worry that it doesn't match the below or the original part of the mesh. Okay, it also cuts in a little bit here, but that's okay. We'll then go ahead and extrude that part out too. Okay, like so. And there we go, we've added a bit of detail to that part of the hull. This kind of separates where the like the gun ports go as well. It's also not quite as big as the one below it. So you kind of have these ports here that now go in the middle of this section. And then the other ones that go just at the top of the second band. At this stage, this is kind of what I like to do when I'm adding detail, because we could just do one section at a time, but I kind of like to bring everything up to sort of a more similar level. So I'm kind of just blocking bits and pieces in as we go. Okay, we'll then go ahead and add in some of the pillars up at the front here that just split up this part of the banister. So if we look at our front reference, I'm just going to hide the rest of the ship. Just get our cube and then scale that down to fit. We'll just build it to this view. This is what I like to do sometimes as well. I'll just turn off everything, like, and make one piece at a time, just to make sure it kind of matches what it's supposed to look like. So some of these can be quite ornate. These ones seem quite simple. They literally just come up, and then, by the looks of it, come up almost at like a pyramidal triangular point. Probably not too sharp. If we check from the top view, they're also pretty square. Maybe we'll just scale them in a little. Okay, and there's not too many of these. So we'll just place these like so. We won't bother about like duplicating these or like scaling them in the minus. Okay, we'll just turn off our reference, bring back our ship. Okay, and then we'll just select all of these, pull them back, and then just make sure they're positioned in the right place. And pull this down slightly. Okay. There are also, looking at it, if we just add these to our top deck detail group and hide that again, there's also, if we turn our reference back on, these big pillars here on the side that kind of join up to the prow. So we'll go ahead and block those in. These ones are actually, they kind of like are on the side more, so they rotate and follow the shape of the outside of the ship. Okay. Let's get these to line up like that. They're slightly more ornate. So if we offset this to about here, then extrude up, scale up, then back in again. I kind of shaped a little bit more like that. Okay, we'll bring back our ship and then just make sure these are placed kind of in the right position. They're right on the corner here. And these are meant to be kind of taller than all the other ones around them. And they go roughly around about here. Kind of right at the front. Okay, then we'll duplicate, reset transformations, and then just scale across. Okay, and you can see even just after spending a little bit of time adding some detail, that's already starting to like bring it to life. It's still looking very, very basic at this point. I think what we'll probably do in the next episode is we'll do some of the really important work, which is actually putting the portholes in here, now that we have the topology for it. And a lot of it would just be kind of making sure we select the right faces, and then just adding in extra loops where we need them, because looking at it, if we look from the side, they're about the size of 4 of these, but some of the edges are not exactly in the right place, so that means we're going to do a bit of editing on the side. They're also not perfectly uniform, right? Like they're kind of stepped, so we have 2 here and then 1 in the middle, so it's almost like, you know, I'm not sure what exactly you do that pattern you would call it, but it's like the ports are, well, you get it, they're not perfectly aligned, right? So our topology is never going to work 100%, and that will just mean we'll need to edit it quite a lot for these portholes. And there really is like kind of no easy way to do that, but that's why we subdivided it one more time, so we have enough density so that we can actually work with that and improve on it and add the portholes. So for this episode, I think we'll leave it there. I would say though, if you want to challenge yourself and keep going with this, keep adding more detail. Just keep blocking in the detail if you want to rush ahead and go ahead of the videos. Because we only have an hour per episode, right, to get to add this detail, and it can take quite a long time. So if I were you, I would actually go ahead and keep adding these extra little details, right? Because you've just seen in this episode how we're going through and blocking in the details, right? So with these pillars and these parts sticking out here and the bands on the hull. And if you want to go ahead and do as much of that as you can, that's perfectly fine. We'll pick this up in the next episode and keep adding them, and then we'll also add the portholes as well. I would say wait till the next episode to add the portholes, just because that can be quite tricky. But if you do want to give it a go, you can always go ahead and just Control D, duplicate that, like top portion of the hole and just name it something like backup. That's kind of what I like to do, and that's probably what we'll do in that episode as well. Worst case scenario, you know, if we do have to go back to it, we always have that backup piece, and then we can just start from scratch, because that part can be quite tricky. But it should be okay. That's not to scare you off. But yeah, I think we will leave that episode there for the time being, and then we'll pick back up in the next episode, add more detail, add the portholes. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have any questions at all, don't hesitate to leave them in the comments. Feel free to email us as well. We always leave our email address in the description too, if you have any questions or feedback or really anything at all. We are also a design studio, so if you need any bespoke design work, be it 2D, 3D, illustrations, animations, feel free to get in touch for that as well. We also have some pre-made work as well, mock-ups on our Etsy and Gumroad. We'll see you in the next episode. Thank you very much for watching.